Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Indiana University's Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, presenting Security Matters, with tips for improving online security in 3 minutes or less. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk.
Anything that we can do to help address the educational outcomes of children who come from low-income families, it's good.
Where is the money for Indiana's pre-K pilot coming from? And who is responsible for making sure programs will be high quality enough to make a difference in the education of low-income children? Heroin's grip on Indiana.
It's become heroin in the heartland, if you will. Rural communities, middle, upper class, it's not specific.
Heroin usage is up 44% over the past 7 years. How law enforcement officials are responding. Plus, we go back to the 1930s and the hunt for the FBI's public enemy #1 right here in Indiana. Those stories and a look at this week's headlines right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Hello, I'm Joe Rennan. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. Indiana is one of 10 states that doesn't provide any state dollars for preschool, but that's about to change. State lawmakers agreed last year to fully fund kindergarten. Now, as Sarah Whitmire reports, a preschool pilot could begin as soon as the fall.
Walk through the halls of Busy Bees Academy in Columbus, and director Kathleen Holliday says you'll notice something different.
Everyone has a stake in each child's education.
Teachers here are charged with preparing each of the school's 115 4-year-olds for kindergarten.
We're also just giving them a foundation for learning.
90% of a child's brain is developed by the time they turn 5.
Well, we know we have a large group of children who enter the kindergarten doors and they're already a year to 2 years behind in their learning and development.
That's Michael Kahn Powers. He's the director at the Early Childhood Center at the Indiana Institute on Disability and Community at Indiana University. He's written numerous policy briefs about pre-K education.
And even with the best kindergarten teachers, it's hard to catch up. And kindergartens have changed so much now because they have strong educational outcomes they need to be meeting. They don't have the time and the luxury to slowly ease all children into formal schooling. And so once behind, then the likelihood is they'll always be behind.
According to the most recent census, only about 40% of Hoosier 3- and 4-year-olds get any preschool, and even fewer attend high-quality programs. Governor Mike Pence made finding money for pre-K his #1 education priority this session.
I believe we can start in the area of early childhood development.
His proposal seemed doomed to fail. But in the waning days of the session, lawmakers revived it, putting the onus on the governor to come up with the money to pay for it. A difficult proposition, given that state revenues are down. Pence recently announced cuts to higher education, and he sold the state plain.
I'm very confident that even in this difficult and uncertain economy that we are managing the state's resources in a prudent way and in a manner that's going to preserve our budget surplus as well as our budget reserves and meet the obligations of our programs around the state.
Pence says he's already identified those pools of money that add up to $10 million within the Family and Social Services Administration, but he hasn't released the specific areas to the public. He says the cuts won't mean any reduction in services. And at least 10% of the money for the pilot is supposed to come from private donations or federal dollars. That can add up to $5 million. There's no cap on the number of students who can be in the pre-K pilot. It's limited only by the amount of money available.
Yes, it would be nice that more children and families could benefit. Beggars can't be choosy. We need to start somewhere. And waiting for everybody to be served, that could take a long time.
Here are the details. The FSSA will select 5 counties to participate in the program. The FSSA will oversee the program. Eligible families must make 127% of the federal poverty level, or about $30,000 for a family of 4. Grants awarded will range from $2,500 to $6,800.
Choosing childcare is one of the most important decisions families will make.
Kids can go to top-rated childcare centers on the state's Path to Quality scale, that is levels 3 and 4. But pre-K researchers are skeptical some of those programs will be high quality enough to make a difference in the education of very low-income children the pilot targets. A study Con Powers conducted found some level 3 programs weren't particularly strong.
You know, they weren't any better than folks that were not participating in the Path to Quality. Research across the country generally finds that quality rating systems aren't always aligned with education quality.
The pilot also includes up to $1 million for a study that will follow the kids in the program through the 3rd grade. Pence says the study will give lawmakers data on the impact the pilot had that they can then use to determine how to best expand pre-K.
It's the Indiana way. Is we get started, we put our money where our hearts are, and then we deliberate, we consider, and we're careful.
Monroe Smart Start Coordinator Jennifer Myers joins us now for more on these pre-K programs. I wanted to start first with a map that our state impact team came up with. It's very interesting. It's on our website, but we wanted to show it now. There are 9 counties that don't have access to any level 3 or 4 rated pre-K programs. Now, they are in white there on the screen. Only about 20 counties have more than 10 level 3 and 4 providers. So when the FSSA selects the participating counties, how do you keep it from focusing on those urban areas?
Right. It's a good question. I don't know at first if that's going to be possible, just because as we focus our efforts on those cities and counties that have passed equality level 3 and level 4, when we look at some place like Bloomington, we have 7 that are level 4 and 12 that are level 3. And when we look at the need for the number of seats for early child care, you know, kids that are going into the system that are age 4, we know that as our county, we don't have enough seats for those kids, which is problematic for, you know, smaller towns and certainly smaller counties.
Now, given the limited availability of the high-quality pre-K programs, is there a balance between accessibility and high quality?
Absolutely, yes.
And what is that?
You know, I think that the dollars drive that, and you know, we're living in a modern society where when we don't have the dollars that are able to fund that pre-K and tuition-free based education, we know that the kids who need it the most are not getting it, and that's the sad state of affairs that we're in. We're lucky, we living in Monroe County, where we have people that are trying to pick up those pieces and to try to fill those gaps, like the United Way of Monroe County and the Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County, so that we're starting to fund those slots and working with our area public schools and helping to gain more slots for children who are low to moderate income families through Title I funds.
Now, part of the legislation mandates parental involvement. How would you envision that in this program?
Well, parental involvement is key. I mean, we know that that a child's brain is fully developed, 85% of that brain is fully developed by age 5, and so we know that parents are a child's first teacher. And we know that the home is instrumental in that. And as far as early childhood educators, they're not only teaching the kids that are within those walls of their classroom, but they're also teaching the parents how to be involved with their kids and how to have a great impact with their child.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Now for headlines, we go over to Alex Dierkman, who has an update on this week's top stories. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Joe. Thank you. Senator Dan Coats has been a vocal opponent of Russia's actions in Ukraine. After further condemning Russia's invasion of Crimea this week, Russia responded with a sanction against Coats. Coats responded that while he was saddened he wouldn't be able to vacation with his family in Siberia, he was honored to be on the list. Officials say there is still more work to be done despite news this week that unemployment in the state is at its lowest level since before the recession. Unemployment fell to 6.4% in January, 0.4 of a point lower than the preceding month. That means Indiana's numbers are slightly below the national average. Still, the state's private sector contracted, losing 7,100 jobs. And a story we've been following all winter, the propane shortage in the Midwest. Suppliers had trouble getting enough propane for their customers. That, coupled with the cold, meant high prices for a lot of people and some complaints of price gouging. The state has gotten so many complaints that now the Attorney General's office is investigating. Beth Slies heats her small home in rural Bloomington with propane. She keeps her thermostat set at 65 degrees to try and conserve. When her tank gets down to about 30% full, she calls and places an order for more. At the beginning of February, Slies called Feral Gas in Ellettsville and ordered a refill. It would be $2.89 a gallon. When the truck delivered the gas about 2 weeks after she paid for it, the driver forgot to leave a receipt, so Slies called the gas company.
She told me that my gas bill was going to be close to $1,600 for that delivery, and that it was $7.14 a gallon. And when I had paid for it, it was $2.89 a gallon.
This graph shows average residential market prices for a gallon of propane in Indiana from 2009 to today. The graph's highest peak was at the height of the shortage on February 3rd, when the prices hit $4.26 per gallon. Around that same time is when Slies was charged $7.14 a gallon. Slies filed a formal complaint with the Attorney General's office. Hers, as it turns out, is one of more than 500 price gouging complaints the AG's office has gotten this year. There's a statewide investigation in progress.
It would be wrong for a company to just charge whatever it wanted to in order to basically force consumers to make a choice between having heat or saving the money.
In response to the allegations, Feral Gas said in a statement, "Given the wild fluctuations in the wholesale price of propane this winter, and given the supply challenges that have forced propane retailers to secure propane at non-typical supply points, it's possible that the price per gallon retailers are charging on any given day is different from retailer to retailer. Those who did not enter into contracts are currently paying more for propane than they have in previous years."
I want to know that when I order that gas and I pay that $600, say, that's it. When the truck arrives and I hear it being pumped into that tank, that's my $600 in that tank. It's not, close to triple that when they pull out.
We should mention Feral Gas in Ellettsville did reduce Beth Slies' bill back to the initial billing price after her conversation with them. Indianapolis Colts owner Jim Irsay is in a healthcare facility after being charged this week with 4 counts of possessing a controlled substance and 1 count of operating a vehicle while intoxicated. The team issued a statement Tuesday saying Irsay voluntarily checked into the facility the same day he was released from the Hamilton County Jail. Irsay, the statement said, is committed to undergoing the treatment and care necessary to help him meet his challenges head-on. Jim, the Irsay family, and the Colts organization are all deeply appreciative of the incredible outpouring of support and compassion from our fans and the Indiana community. Irsay is expected to appear in Hamilton County Court Wednesday afternoon. A group working in Monroe County to enroll people in the Affordable Care Act is enlisting the help of students. As of February 1st, the percentage of Hoosiers between the ages of 18 and 34 who enrolled in the Federal Health Exchange was 23%. The goal of the Affordable Care Act is generally to enroll young people at the same rate as older adults. That's because the healthy people will help subsidize the costs of the sicker people. The Affordable Care Act volunteers of Monroe County have established a companion program at Indiana University to help enroll students. Volunteers say, in general, students they meet are confused and have a lot of questions. The student-centered campaign continues through the end of the month when the open enrollment period ends. A new initiative works to partner hospitals with experts who can help with everything from physician recruitment to regulatory changes associated with the Affordable Care Act. As Samantha Estes reports, the program is targeted towards rural hospitals, which often have a difficult time keeping up with medical trends.
Greene County General Hospital is one of 27 hospitals that are members of the Indiana Rural Health Association, and that gives them access to the Business Partner Network. It's basically a list of pre-approved companies that hospitals can choose from to help them with their business needs. Director of Marketing and Physician Recruiting Corey Sparks says he hopes the network will help Greene County Hospital with physician recruitment.
We are a medically underserved area here. So, we have to do a better job of recruiting physicians, and once they get here, retaining them, making sure they put down roots and, stay here for a while.
Indiana Rural Health Association representatives say many rural hospitals are having a hard time keeping up with new regulations from the Affordable Care Act on top of day-to-day activities, and the Business Partner Network aims to alleviate those burdens by providing businesses that deal with rural hospitals on a regular basis.
One of the elements that we're really hopeful of is just providing that space for hospitals and providers to come together and share with one another.
The Business Partner Network website also allows businesses and hospitals to share their expertise via blogs and webinars, something they say is increasingly important with the medical field's fast-paced environment.
And the Wabash Valley Correctional Facility is the most recent prison in Indiana to establish an American Legion post. Data shows Legion posts inside correctional facilities have a marked effect on recidivism rates. Incarcerated Legion members get to work on community projects with other veterans, just like they would if they were out of prison. And Joe, the American Legion in Indiana is working to establish posts at the Terre Haute Federal Prison and correctional facilities in Putnamville and Branchville.
Well, let's hope to see them progress. Yes. Thanks, Alex. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. The purity of heroin varies from 10 to 70% in Indiana, making overdoses more likely because addicts don't know what they're getting. Our two-part series continues. And it was 80 years ago this month that the man known by the FBI as Public Enemy #1 escaped from an Indiana jail. In our History Through Headlines segment, we relive the hunt for notorious robber John Dillinger. Those stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
We believe in the excitement of exploration, that life offers each of us adventures that are ours for the taking. We believe that children are born explorers who need trusted guides on their journeys of discovery. We believe in breaking new ground and in challenging assumptions, that important questions deserve to be explored deeply, fairly, and honestly. And we believe that who you are and where you come from should never stand in the way of what you want to be. This is who we are. This is what we believe. This is PBS.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Heroin can be cut or mixed with almost anything to increase its potency or to make it stretch. Dealers use everything from baby formula to battery acid residue. As Simon Thompson reports in this second of a two-part series, this puts users at high risk of overdosing and dying.
10 years ago, when Aaron Dietz was working on the Hamilton-Boone County Drug Task Force, cocaine was his #1 opponent.
That's what we do. Target drug dealers, repeat offenders, and those who are trafficking various drugs.
Cocaine usage in the US has dropped by half since 2006, and it's continuing to decline. But heroin has picked up the slack. Recent numbers show usage has increased 44% since 2007.
It's become heroin in the heartland, if you will. Rural communities, middle, upper class.
Dietz says dealers will cut their heroin with whatever they can get their hands on to stretch it out.
So depending on how much they cut it, or they call it the street term of stepping on that heroin, they can take a small amount of heroin and double it and double their profits.
Heroin can be mixed with common household products such as sugar, powdered milk, or rat poison. While mixing heroin with those products weakens it, cutting it with prescription drugs can make it more potent. Prescription painkiller fentanyl can be as much as 100 times more powerful than the heroin it's mixed with. Jason Ritchie is one of the best harmonica players in the world, but he lost his career to addiction.
You know, most of us that have been using a while choose to inject. Yeah. The danger in doing that is nobody tests dope first. They don't say, okay, well, let me do a little bit and see how strong it is. Never met anybody, ever, who does that.
Ritchie says a lot of addicts think they can tell what they're getting based on the look and the smell of it. But really, it's not until someone overdoses and dies that they find out just how potent it is.
When somebody overdoses everybody in town wants to know where they got it from. But not to stay away from it, to go get it. Because that's obviously the good.
The number one goal of the Hamilton and Boone County Drug Task Force is to shut dealers down. But Dietz acknowledges that the effectiveness of that strategy is limited. If you shut down one dealer, addicts will just find another one.
When they switch and that source of heroin comes from someone else, that purity could be much, much higher. And the problem comes into is when they use that heroin in the same amount, the potential of death is there.
In attempts to reduce overdose deaths in 2009, the German government actually began providing addicts with regulated heroin at a consistent potency. The next year, heroin overdose deaths dropped 8%.
Europeans are different. In America, I mean, they don't have supersized meals over there anyway. Americans think big. They always try to push things to the limit, and I don't think everything that may work there always culturally fits over here.
Deterring first-time users is arguably more important with heroin than any other drug because it's so addictive. Treatment counsellor Mark Granger says people can become addicted after shooting up just 3 times.
Chosen a path, as at some point they did choose to experiment. They chose to use something recreationally. They chose to abuse a substance. But that choice quickly evaporates and it's no longer a choice for them.
Health professionals say on average it takes an addict 8 attempts at treatment before they really recover and stay clean. This is Richie's second attempt. He says Indiana has actually been a good place for him to get his life back together. He's 6 months sober and working at the Recovery and Engagement Centre in Bloomington. He'll be able to leave the state in May, but says he'll likely stay a little while longer.
There's certain little things I can do every day. I've accepted it as like sort of an insulin, like to a diabetic. And then I can say truthfully, if I do those things every day for the rest of my life, I will never get high. But I can't tell you I'll never get high.
Simon Thompson joins us now for more. Simon, I was reading where the rise of the use of heroin is due to the fact that it doesn't cost much. Is that true even in Indiana, despite the fact that there really isn't many big urban trading areas?
Certainly. You can buy a hit of heroin in Indiana for as little as $10. But the thing is that, it doesn't take long for an addict to build up that tolerance, and they need more and more heroin to get the same high. Jason Ritchie talked about how it wasn't long before he had a $200 a day habit. And then there's the additional problem where addicts who are using for a long time can't get high anymore, and they still need heroin just to feel normal, just to function, to stave off the withdrawal symptoms like, nausea, vomiting, stomach aches, and that's only 10 hours after your last use before those kind of symptoms kick in.
Indiana lawmakers are acknowledging the growing rate of heroin use in Indiana. In this most recent legislative session, we've seen them add heroin protection for heroin users in the Lifeline law. Can you explain that a little bit?
So first responders, police officers are being equipped with a heroin antidote. It's called naloxone. It's basically a nasal spray, or it can be injected. It's given to somebody who's overdosed, and immediately kind of reverses the effect of that overdose. But Indiana's kind of still a little bit behind other states on this. In about a third of states, they've made this available to everyday people. It's prescribed. So let's say if I had a child who was struggling with addiction, I could have that at my home. I could have that on hand. And in the case that my child overdosed, I could administer it and potentially save their lives.
Very interesting. And if people missed part 1, it's on our website, WTIUnews.org, from last week. Thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you.
And now we take a look back at what was making the news in our History Through Headlines segment. It was March 1934. Shirley Temple appeared in her first movie, Stand Up and Cheer. Duke Ellington climbed to the top with his #1 hit, Cocktails for Two. FDR was in his first term as president. And the FBI's most wanted carved his own weapon from wood to escape an Indiana jail. The headline reads, Dillinger is peekaboo expert. Indiana gangster John Dillinger escaped from a Crown Point, Indiana jail with a wooden gun 80 years ago. The jailbreak led the FBI to call him public enemy #1.
People never saw the gun. He stuck it in their side, in the ribs, and he threatened that I'm getting out here one way or another, I'll kill you if I have to. So this is a replica of that wooden gun he used. And What he did was each time he grabbed a guard, he'd put him in a cell and lock him up. And he ended up locking up 10 guards and a dozen trustees.
Dillinger was born in Indianapolis, but his family moved to Mooresville when Dillinger was 16 and started getting in trouble. They wanted to move away from the bad crowds. The house is still there and lived in by Dillinger's great-nephew. Dillinger, the notorious robber, was portrayed by many people as kind of a hero.
It was during the time of the Great Depression, so there was a lot of people were in hard times. And a lot of the banks foreclosed and took farms and homes and a lot of people's life savings. Here's these banks taking everything away from them, and here's a guy fighting back, taking from the banks.
He was killed by agents outside of the Biograph Theater in Chicago later that July, 80 years ago. He was 31 years old. He robbed 6 banks in Indiana, including one of his biggest in Greencastle. And a new system to alert Howard County residents of potential severe weather went live this week. There are no sirens in the area, so residents have relied on weather radios to alert them about storms, such as the tornadoes that hit Kokomo in November. The new system calls residents' cell phones to notify them if they're in a storm's path. In addition to severe weather, the system can notify people of other public health and safety concerns, such as health hazards, amber alerts, and street closings. People can sign up for all the alerts or pick the specific ones they want to receive. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news in southern Indiana throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Good night.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Indiana University's Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, presenting Security Matters, with tips for improving online security in 3 minutes or less. And by WTIU members. Thank you.